Welcome to What She Said, the heartbeat of Canadian women's voices, with me, your host, Candace Sampson. Here, we dive deep into the raw, unfiltered stories and triumphs of women from coast to coast. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement where empowerment and education collide and where mansplaining is shown the door. We're here to celebrate, uplift, and echo you. So get cozy, tune in, and let's embark on this journey together, exploring the rich tapestry of women's lives, their battles and victories, right here on What She Said. Over my summer break, I spent a great deal of time reflecting on my mental well-being. Just by the very nature of what I do for a living, I'm often exposed to stories that are stressful, an unending number of hot takes from individuals outside their areas of expertise on social media, and a general influx of negative energy. Fortunately, years of self-work, and I'm going to really put an emphasis on years, have taught me to recognize when this energy starts to suck the life out of me and when it's time to hit the reset button to change the algorithm of my life, if you will. The last few weeks, I've been actively seeking out joy and reconnecting with things that give me purpose. And in doing so, I gave today's first guest the entire first half to share her wisdom with you, because I know I'm not alone in feeling the weight of recent years. So today's show is a gift to you, focusing on finding your center and infusing your lives with joy. So here's what's coming up. The past few years have challenged us in unprecedented ways. Since 2020, we've faced a barrage of troubling news, financial struggles, and increased isolation due to the pandemic. It's felt like joy has been elusive and our resilience stretched thin. But there is a pathway back to strength and happiness. Today, I am so thrilled to have Dr. Susan Biali Haas with us. She's a medical doctor, wellness expert, and author of The Resilient Life. Dr. Susan will share vital insights on how we can rebuild our resilience and reclaim joy in our lives. In the second half of the show, we'll lighten the mood with some entertainment joy. And Brodie joins me with her latest reviews, including the intriguing reboot of the 1972 film Caligula, starring Malcolm McDowell and Helen Mirren. Why this is so interesting to me this week is that Anne's review just cracked me up. So make sure you stick around to listen to that. She'll also give us a sneak peek at Good One and The Good Half, and take a look at the HBO original Chimp Crazy, and we'll discuss The Heartfelt My Penguin Friend, based on a true story. Lastly, I'm so excited to introduce you to Claire Zlobin, founder of Life with a Baby, Canada's largest peer-to-peer network for parents of children aged 0 to 12. Claire has also created Drop of Golden Sun, which features stories and blogs from parents traveling the world with their young children. Today, she shares her expertise on teaching kids to scuba dive and reveals some of the best family-friendly snorkeling and diving spots. So stay tuned as we explore these enriching topics and more right here on What She Said. The past few years have been incredibly tough on everyone. Since 2020, we've been bombarded with constant doom and gloom from the news. Many of us are struggling financially, and the pandemic has left us more isolated than ever before. It feels like joy has been hard to come by, and resilience has been tested to the limit. So how do we find our way back to a place of strength and happiness? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Susan Biali Haas, a renowned medical doctor, wellness expert, and author of The Resilient Life. She's here to share insights on how we can rebuild our resilience and rediscover joy in our lives. Welcome to What She Said, Susan.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
This is such a big topic. I'm really excited to have it, as much for myself as for my listeners. I think we all need to find that joy in life. So your book, The Resilient Life, talks about breaking the cycle of overwhelm and exhaustion. So can you start by explaining how people can recognize the difference between everyday stress, burnout, and then more serious mental health issues like depression or anxiety?
Yes. First of all, it's so important to cultivate that awareness, because for so many of us, we push and we just keep going, and then we crash really, really hard, and we haven't realized over time how we're feeling, how we're actually doing. So very important to be checking in with yourself regularly. And that might be through journaling, for example, or even just spending a bit of time on your own on a regular basis somewhere in your life and really checking in with how you're doing. And in terms of being able to tell whether we're dealing with an actual clinical mental health issue like clinical depression or clinical anxiety, is that those conditions, not only are they protracted in the sense that usually for diagnostic purposes, we will say that for depression, for example, that you've been experiencing a low mood more days than not for at least 2 weeks. So it's a prolonged trend, and I would say even longer than that. And then also one of the key hallmarks is that whether it's your anxiety, whether it's your low mood, it's starting to really affect your functioning in your life, and it's starting to affect your relationships. Maybe it's affecting your ability to do your job. So it's really starting to have a noticeable impact, not just on you, but on your circumstances and on those around you.
I'd like to go back just for a second, if we could, to where you said, cultivating self-awareness, because I think that's really important. I think a lot of times I'm guilty of it. I've seen many of my peers guilty of it, is, they're feeling down, they're not themselves, and they're like, I'm fine. And
Yeah.
they push through, and it actually just exacerbates the problem and makes it so much worse. So any tips for sort of cultivating as a first step that self-awareness? And you mentioned journaling. Are there other things we can do?
Sure. There are apps out there, for example, that actually will track your mood. So it will prompt you every day to stop and reflect and ask how you're doing. Are you feeling good? Are you feeling bad? Are you feeling sad? And so you can actually then see over time. It creates like a snapshot and a progressive kind of calendar where you can get a real sense of how you're doing. Because often when we're having a really bad day, like I had a really bad day couple days ago. And when you're in that mood where you're going through grief or you're just sad or you're really, really overwhelmed and tired, it can feel like your whole life is a disaster in that moment. But then reflecting on myself, I know that that was the day where I needed to actually get in touch with some grief that I was dealing with. I lost my precious dog about 6 weeks ago. And so I had to really allow myself space to feel as sad as I was feeling, but I'm not depressed. Like I feel great today. I felt good yesterday. That was a normal moment in human emotion, because it's actually not a good thing if you're actually never having ups and downs, because it's human to have emotions, to feel really great sometimes, to feel really low sometimes. But it's that awareness of, is this starting to get into a pattern where I'm feeling terrible or I'm feeling really wired and stressed and scared more often than not. And, it's never wrong. If you're at all concerned about yourself, it's never a bad thing to get a second opinion, to talk to your doctor, to talk to a counselor, to talk to a trusted friend or family member who can provide some feedback. Because as you were suggesting, Candace, we don't want to let these things get to the point where they're now a serious clinical issue. We want to notice when our mood starts shifting more steadily down or we're feeling increasingly anxious, and we want to get support, get help, take care of ourselves when those early signs are showing.
Yeah, we're also not making the best decisions when we're under that stress. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've made snap decisions on something and then later regretted it, thinking I was probably not in the best mental space to make that call. And so that's where self-awareness comes in, right?
Yes, absolutely. I speak a lot to organizations about burnout. And we know, for example, when people experience burnout, they're 6 times more likely to want to quit their jobs. But that's often coming from the place they're in, the really low place they're in. And as an executive coach, I've worked with so many people who've come to me because they're feeling, well, they actually don't know they're severely burned out. They just know they can't keep going anymore. They want to quit their jobs. And then when we work on shifting things in their workplace and the way they relate to their work and how they take care of themselves, the majority of those people actually don't end up quitting their jobs. So this ties exactly to what you've said, that we want to be really careful of being aware of where we're at and not making any important decisions from a really low place, and having the reflex instead to be to reach out for help and get support and try to find out what is going on.
And the last few years in particular, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it just in the field you're in, have really drained people's energy and joy. So what are some simple, or are there simple science-based shifts that people can start making today to restore their mental health and well-being?
Yes. So I always start with fundamentals because you will get the most mileage out of things like sleep. So if you're routinely not getting enough sleep or your quality of your sleep is poor, get that addressed. Again, see your doctor. There are great sleep clinics out there. If you have a benefit plan through your work, it would probably even cover something like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is very, very impactful. So something like that. If you're not sleeping well, get sleeping better, and that will immediately improve everything in your life, including your mood and your joy. And same thing for eating well and also getting moving every day. Even something as simple as just going for a walk, increasing any way you can increase movement, taking the stairs whenever you can. We know that profoundly affects the neurochemistry of the brain and will elevate your mood, help you to solve problems better. You get, again, so much mileage out of that. And then once you've got those fundamentals covered, because we often don't like to do those. We want some like fancy hack or trick. And it's like, no, actually, if you're not sleeping, work on that. But once those are fine and feeling better, something as simple as identifying the small things in your life, in our world, that make you laugh, bring you joy, bring you delight, bring you a sense of peace, whatever those things are, try to expose yourself to them as much as you can, because we know that, especially when we've been through a time like COVID and the financial stress and all the things that are going on in our world, our brain starts getting wired more towards the negative and feeling anxious and feeling worried and feeling negative. And so the more that we can expose our brain to delightful things, things that make us feel good, things that give us hope, our brain is going to shift over and rewire and change its chemistry so that we start feeling better and recover from all that we've been through as a society.
You mentioned in your book the importance of reconnecting with what matters most, and that's going to vary obviously for everybody. But so how can people start to identify and make time for those things, especially when they're in their headspace is overwhelmed and maybe not the most positive? How do you make those changes and identify what is going to move you in the right direction?
It's back to that awareness piece again. So one thing that I really recommend, as I already mentioned, is that you have some way of checking in with yourself to see how you're doing. And then a question that I give people to ask themselves when they are just feeling too overwhelmed and don't even know where to start is to ask yourself, what do I need most right now? And you'd be surprised what comes up, and pay attention to whatever comes up and then do it. Give it to yourself, whatever it is. For a lot of us, it's actually just some time to do nothing and be on our own and recharge. And there's so many small ways to do that. And then once you're aware of yourself and you're starting to give yourself some really fundamental things that you need, you're starting to feel a bit better, that's when you can start asking yourself some deeper questions like, what really matters to me in my life? And an exercise that I have people do to try to connect to that is to come up with your top 4 priorities in your life. If you get to make that list, like anything goes on this that you want, what matters to you? And it's especially important if things go on this list that have not been getting your time and attention, the things that you just long to do that you never seem to have time for, whether that's exercising, some kind of art that you love, reading, time with your spouse, time with your kids, like anything can go on that list. And so this is all about connecting with ourselves, taking time to ask ourselves those questions and to give ourselves permission to be really honest about what our answers are, not what anybody else wants our answer to be, but what our answers are.
We're speaking with Dr. Susan Biali Haas, author of The Resilient Life. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to continue the discussion.
Hi, I'm Michelle Davis, host of Maverick Makers. Every week, I'm meeting entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs who are making it happen. These bold thinkers are taking big risks, are trailblazing the way in their industries and lives, and are changing how things are done or made. You will learn about their journeys, their lessons learned, and their biggest maverick moves to date. Listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at maverickmakerspodcast.com.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Susan Biali Haas. We're talking about building a resilient life. And one of the biggest challenges I think that many find right now is finding purpose and meaning in life. We're being pulled in a million directions. It's hard to actually find those things right now. So how can resilience help someone who feels stuck or disconnected, help them find their passion?
Well, resilience for me is about getting our minds, bodies, and spirits into a place of thriving. And this is not a permanent state because, of course, life has all kinds of blows that it will hit us with in our personal lives and in the world. But we want to, as much as we can, and with lots of grace and compassion for ourselves, live in a way that we give ourselves the best opportunity to be able to recover from the things that happen in our lives that knock us down, and also live in a way that when those things come along, we're going to be much more likely to stay standing. And so I've already mentioned some of those things, like fundamentals of looking after your health, staying connected with how you're doing, but then also you want to, with that awareness, which I talked about knowing what your priorities are, you eventually get into a place where you're no longer just trying to keep your head above water, but you're actually present in your life and you're as healthy as you can be. Your mental health is better. You've got a lot more clarity. You feel like you can breathe. And now you can start really thinking about, what is my passion? Like what really makes me feel alive, and how can I structure this into my life? And the more that we are in that place of resilience and thriving, the more that we can engage with this. But as someone who emerged from severe depression and burnout and healed herself through flamenco dancing, a lot of the time, the passion actually can be part of the life saving. So even though, given what I've said, I wouldn't say you necessarily have to wait till everything is perfect to start looking for your passion. I want you to live in a way that's resilient, but a lot of the time also connecting with that passion during a difficult time can really also help you to be more resilient.
What are the qualities of a resilient person? What does a resilient person look like? How do they act?
Well, a lot of it actually has to do with our connections as people to externals in our environment. And that's actually what we know from research to be the fundamental drivers of resilience. So that's people who have structure in their lives. They're not afraid to have commitments and structure. They also have responsibilities. So they're not just focused on themselves. They're also helping others, not to the point of their own disaster, but resilient people are connected to others. They have responsibilities in this world and they honor those responsibilities, but they also receive help and they have lots of connections that they keep healthy, which I know can be hard depending on the season in your life. So it can just be your most important connections, like the people closest to you, the people you care about most, places where you feel you belong. People who are really resilient have a strong sense of belonging in this world. So know where it is that you feel you belong. And again, this is unique to you. It can be whatever has meaning for you. And the more that you're part of community, that you're connected to people, that you're showing up in your life, and also positive thinking, which then you might hear in the way a resilient person talks. We know that when people realistically cultivate positive, optimistic expectations for what's going on in the world and their life, that also builds resilience. So a lot of these things that you will see a resilient people doing are fundamental to their strength.
You talked about connections there, and it has me thinking about sort of the quality of our connections. How much do, say, negative people impact our ability to be resilient or to improve our lives? How do we identify those people who are perhaps not helping us get ahead or get out of these situations? Do you talk to people about those sort of things? Is that a common denominator, is negative people?
I would say so. And it's certainly something that I have been really working on myself because, especially for women, we are cultured, we are programmed to be good all the time and to be more concerned with how we are maybe responding to someone or how someone is perceiving us, then we are actually giving ourselves a chance to actually evaluate this individual who's in front of us. And so I've been really working on paying attention to how someone is making me feel. Like, am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling unsafe? And, why may that be? Is it something within myself that actually has nothing to do with the other person based on some past experience? Or is there actually something I need to be paying attention to? And how do I feel after that interaction with that person? I found that, say, certain people in my life, after I spent time with them, I can't sleep or I feel really stressed. And in my past, I would have probably turned that on myself, like there's something wrong with me. But it is really important. And it depends on who the person is, right? Whether it's, say, like a boss, and you can't just go, well, enough of you. And, maybe you can't quit your job. And so you have to learn how to manage that relationship and sometimes limit exposure. Like with negative people, often it can be really important to be careful of how we engage with them and what we say to them and whether we give them opportunities to attack, because there are certain things that will often provoke people. Anyway, I've written an article about this for Psychology Today called "Don't Try to Reason with Unreasonable People." It's my most popular blog ever. So you want my hard hitting advice, go read that. But it's a real factor.
The other thing I think too is that people who are negative, you were talking there and you said, how do you feel around there? My daughter and I are struggling right now a little bit with our relationship. We're having a lot of talks. And some of that is me bringing things in. And so it's taken me the opportunity to recognize that I might cause her some anxiousness in the way I respond. Right. And so for people who maybe find themselves negative, are there tips for people to maybe steer themselves away from that a little bit so they're not impacting the people in their life with their negativity, or maybe the way they're sort of conditioned to respond to things?
Yes. And for any of these situations, if it's something that's really troubling you and you're really struggling with, it is always a good idea to get counseling support so that you have an expert perspective from a qualified licensed professional on what's going on. Because often if we're just in our own heads and we're trying to figure this out, especially if we're dealing with someone who actually has pathology, like maybe they have a personality disorder, maybe you're dealing with a narcissist or someone like that, they can often make you feel like you're the wrong person, you're the bad person. They'll often tell you that directly, but they're wrong, generally speaking, and it's their way of interacting with people and having power over. So I think with certain things, like noticing, like I've noticed, I really want to stop complaining, or I want to spend less time talking and more time listening to the people in my life. So there are basic fundamental things that are pretty safe to work on our own. But if the relationships are complex and we're feeling a lot of distress from them, bring an expert in to give you perspective.
We're going to take another quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Susan Biali Haas to continue our discussion on resilience. Okay, we're back with Dr. Susan Biali Haas. We're discussing resilience today. And actually, I want to turn our conversation a little bit to burnout, because I think oftentimes people don't realize they're burnt out until they are actually burnt out and are not really recognizing the signs on the way down to sort of the bottom of it. So what are the signs of burnout? And are there things we can do to sort of turn the tide before we get to that full-on meltdown, I suppose?
Yes, that's a great question, because the word gets thrown around so much, but most of us, even our own doctors, speaking as a doctor who didn't learn about this in my training, we don't actually know what it really means clinically. And so for a person to actually have true burnout, there need to be three things present. The first is emotional exhaustion, which is a feeling that you just cannot keep going. And it's specifically related to your work. So burnout is a work-related phenomenon. I need to emphasize that as well. The second is that you're having increasing negativity and cynicism and resentment, specifically about your work. Like you might find yourself complaining a lot about it or resenting your coworkers in a way that didn't happen before. And you need to pay attention to those shifts, because we often think, oh, what's wrong with me? What's happening to me? And it's actually a result of chronic work-related stress, because that's what drives burnout. And then the third component is decreased efficacy and productivity, specifically at your work. So you may be working harder than you ever have, longer than you ever have, but you're less effective. And you may even be starting to question whether you're qualified for the job that you're in. You may start questioning whether you should even be doing that job, which is the case with those clients that come to me to help them quit their jobs when it turns out they were actually just burned out. And so remind me, you said, what can people do to maybe get ahead of it? And
right.
Really, it's important, again, to have that awareness, to watch out for those three hallmarks and individually, because usually you'll start out with one or maybe two. And so you want to catch yourself in that zone, like when you're starting to feel more and more emotionally exhausted, when you're starting to feel irritation and resentment about your work, for example, or you're having a hard time getting your job done. I normally say to people, one of the very first things you should do is go see your doctor, because there can be biological causes. Like maybe you have a thyroid condition. And I have a friend who thought she was burned out, but she actually had low iron. She had iron deficiency anemia. And so that's really the first step. And then I could go on for hours about what you would actually do once you've established that it really is burnout. But again, I would really recommend working with a counselor or a coach, looking at things in your work environment that you can change to reduce stress and maybe change ways that you're working. When I work with leaders, a lot of the time, it's actually the pressures that they are putting on themselves, the language in their heads about themselves. They're not delegating. They have no boundaries. And then also non-work related things like, how are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking vacation? Are you having downtime? Are you sleeping? I can literally talk about this for hours, but that's a general summary.
I actually know some people you could talk to for hours. Maybe we'll have to connect to after the show. You've talked about using neuroscience-based techniques to rewire the brain and reduce our stress levels. So can you share one or two of these techniques?
Yes. One of the most powerful ones. I love breathing, but I feel like it's talked about a lot. So I'm going to give you a bit more juicy one. And that's a way that you can actually really fundamentally change the way that your brain anticipates something as being stressful or scary. And for me, that would be, say, a speech in front of thousands of people. The way that I used to be was that I would feel anxiety for months in advance of a really huge gig. This was years ago. And I learned a technique where whenever I started to feel really anxious about an upcoming gig, I would step aside on my own in private, and I would go through this process where I would visualize in my mind a speech that I just loved and really connect using all my senses of that experience. So I would really whole body, whole mind reconnect with how amazing it felt to be in that room with all those people. And then the next step is to then envision the current speech that I'm feeling anxious about, and to imagine being in that room and the joy and the purpose and the lights and the smells. And when you shift your brain from being anxious about something to actually anticipating it with joy and passion as if it's happening in the moment, your brain will actually start to look forward to that and feel much less anxious. And you can really, really change the way you think about things that intimidate you.
I think one of the things I really like about you, Susan, is that not only are you an expert in this field, but you also have deep personal experience with these things. How has your personal journey influenced the advice and strategies that you share with people?
It's the foundation of everything, really, starting with the severe depression and burnout I experienced and trauma-related symptoms that were undiagnosed that I experienced in my ER residency training initially. And even though I was trained as a physician and I had training in psychiatry as part of that, what I had learned really inadequately addressed what I had experienced. And I wanted to understand it, and I wanted to prevent it ever happening again. So it started this journey, this mission of wanting to empower myself and then empower people, which has now become a full-time passion. I do this full-time now. And it's ongoing, continual process where I observe more about myself, want to understand it, want to learn about it scientifically, want to learn how to shift things, and then share what I'm learning with people. It's just the most delicious thing ever.
Well, the other day I posted a video on TikTok. It's gone semi-viral.
Wow.
And it's just my girlfriends and I running around, just talking about our long friendship. And there's so many comments of women who are like, I wish I had one friend. I wish I had that connection. Show me, teach me. How do I do this? And it's an overwhelming theme a lot of times when I post these videos of me with my group of friends, of people just wanting or longing for that. So how can people, I think adults especially, really struggle with, connection? Are there tips for people to rebuild connections, find friends? I mean, we really are lost behind our screens, it seems.
Yes. Yes. And I've seen research. There's an epidemic of loneliness in North America that's really well documented. And there are a shocking number of people who, on surveys, say they don't have one close friend. And I'm very introverted, and I still tend to hover on the edge of mental health challenges. Like, it's something because of what happened to my brain when I was in residency. It's always a thing. And so I always have to watch that I don't isolate too much. And I have to work at maintaining my connections. And so with respect to building those, I do think it's a good idea to start with what you already have rather than starting from nothing. So to think about, who were those people in life that you were connected with in the past, and can you reach out? Like, as an example, last night I was part of actually like a Zoom meeting, but that's only because it was happening in Seattle and I couldn't get down there. But she's someone who was my best friend in high school, and we lost touch for years. And then I don't even know how it happened, but we reconnected, and we found out that we both had this shared new mutual passion. And we really reconnected over that. And now, like, she hosts these groups where women meet it's kind of almost like a book club kind of thing. And like, I join in virtually, but that connection with her, like, she and I talk regularly through Zoom now. And like, that took effort. Like, once when I was driving back from recording a video in Oregon, I made a point of stopping by her house just to say hi for an hour. And so within our very, very busy lives, because that's a big part of the problem too, we can find these ways. And I travel a lot for work, so it's really tough for me often to be doing in-person things, but I've really made it a priority with a small handful of people that our relationships have really deepened because of that intentional effort.
We're going to close out this interview, and believe me, I would love to spend hours discussing this topic with you, but we're going to end here for today. So is there a message, though, that you would like to give people who are maybe listening, who are struggling to find hope and joy in their daily life?
Yes. It can be really helpful if right now is really, really hard. And believe me, I know what that is like. To think back to a season in your life where things felt very different, where you had hope, where you felt more alive, where you were maybe even more yourself. To think about, what were the things that you were doing then? What were the things you believed about yourself? What were the things in your life that mattered? And what is some element of that you can start reconnecting to? And you would be surprised. The stories I hear from people, I have goosebumps even just saying it. The small things that people remember and the miraculous ways that those can come alive, or even just one little aspect can start to light up one tiny corner of your life, and then it just starts to spread. So I really recommend doing that exercise, and know that it is going to get better. It is going to get better. There's actually a sort of a law of nature, a law of life. Don't be deceived by the lie that it's always going to be this hard, because it is not.
Yeah, I feel that in my core, honestly, I went through an incredibly trying several years. And a quote that I'm going to paraphrase, but the quote is generally, this is just a chapter, not your whole story. And I hung on to that for dear life, and it did pull me through what was a very trying time. And speaking of chapters, you have several of them in your book. So where can people find your book? Where can they connect with you? Do you have social channels they can follow along on?
Yeah. So the book should be available everywhere books are sold, at least online for sure. And you can also find out more about it at theresilientlifebook.com. You can find out more about me and my work and also get a free ebook, 10 Essential Easy Changes, at thriveworklive.com. And my socials are at Dr. Susan Biali, generally speaking. That's my handle everywhere. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm on everywhere else. Come connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want.
All right. Fantastic. I can't thank you enough for joining me. I know this has helped somebody today.
Thank you.
It's time for Saturday Night at the Movies, and we have a lot to get into this week, so we're going to jump right in. And let's start with Caligula.
Holy cow. I had never seen that, and I didn't particularly seek it out. It was created by Bob Guccione, who owned Penthouse, and it created a sensation there when it was released in 79. And so I see it now. They've restored it. Holy cow. No wonder it was so shocking back then. It's not so much shocking now, unless you look not at the sex stuff, which is in every single frame. It's about completely corrupt individuals seeking power and what he does and who he kills. And it just is so creepy to us today because we know all about this. So Malcolm McDowell, and it's so funny that he is now in Son of a Critch, because this is just wowzer up there. He and Helen Mirren star as lovers. He's also having an affair with his sister. And this is all based on fact. His full name was Prince Gaius Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, and he arrived to rule Rome and Roman holdings when his uncle died of syphilis, of course, and he'd been murdered. So I can't describe to you fully what it is, but the depth of the film, the depth of the visual, all you see is people having sex for like 2.5 hours. And it's like, okay, whatever. It's not erotic in any way. So it's being released here in Toronto at the Review Cinema. It's called Caligula, the Ultimate Cut. And it is incredibly provocative due to the subject matter. And, I'm kind of gobsmacked. I don't really know how to describe it. But I will online. So go to my review. And the thing is, his cruelty is incredible. And his ways of dispatching with enemies, incredibly imaginative, shall we say. It's just,
all right.
Whoa.
It sounds interesting, to say the least, Anne.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on, because we have a couple of good movies. We have The Good One and The Good Half.
That's right. So The Good One is about a 17-year-old girl who goes camping in the Catskills with her father and his best friend. The father and the friend have known each other their entire lives, and they get along, except on this trip. So they begin to see differences in their personalities, and the tables turn. She's an amazing young girl, and she becomes their advisor. She settles them down. She becomes the adult in the situation where they've become children. It's what can happen when you're out of your comfort zone, when you're out in the woods, and then the friend makes a very strange remark to her, and the entire tone of the trip changes. And before long, the two guys turn on her. It's slow and subtle and incredibly good on every level, writing, directing, performances, particularly the girl who played Callias is her last name. I can't remember her first name right now, but she is out of this world. And she does not try to fit into their universe. She tries to be who she is, and she takes the brunt for that. Now that's at Lightbox and expanding on the 23rd.
And the good half?
And the good half is about grief. Now, Nick Jonas, who you know from music and film, he is utterly amazing in this film. He comes home from Los Angeles, he's a writer, to attend his mother's funeral. Elizabeth Shue plays the mother, and she comes back in his memory. And it's the most intimate, thoughtful, sweet, and painful film. It's such a wonderful study of how you cope with things when your parent dies. He didn't like her two husbands, played by David Arquette and Matt Welsh. There's a funeral that they have to contend with. And it's about trying to deal with everything, keeping it together, and not breaking, because his mother would not have appreciated that. She was a very strong woman. And it also presents things we might not necessarily have considered in the face of death. A lot of big and small questions, very much worth seeing, and it's in theaters.
Okay. Tell me about Chimp Crazy. That looked very interesting to me.
Yeah, it's on HBO and Max, and it's about a woman named Tanya Haddix. She calls herself the Dolly Parton of chimps. Well, she had a sanctuary that she took over from another woman, and she was constantly besieged by authorities, lawsuits, PETA, who did not appreciate the way that she was keeping them caged, the usual story, and that not enough was being done for them. Plus, she had Tonka, who I actually met back in 1997. And he became an actor. He was in a lot of commercials. He was in Buddy, a film with Alan Cumming, who is now a PETA activist fighting to save Tonka. Well, police came to take Tonka away, and he wasn't there anymore. And the whole thing is, where is Tonka? Is he dead? What happened to him? So it's almost like a thriller. And you'll feel disgust and pity for this woman who is her own worst enemy. And then we also see, in a cautionary way, what can happen to owners. I mean, actual footage of what has happened to owners of chimps and apes, and incredible. There have been some really bad situations. So, makes you think.
Absolutely. Listen, I got to tell you, when you sent over the films we're going to be reviewing today, you included a movie called My Penguin Friend. And I immediately perked up when I saw this, because this is a really interesting phenomena happening right now, because I actually heard about this movie through a viral video on TikTok. And a man was doing a live, and another account jumped in to join because there was nobody there. He just felt bad for him. And they started talking, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm a cancer researcher," and so on. And then he said, "Do you do anything else?" And the guy said, "Yes, actually, I have a film coming out, My Penguin Friend." And he started to describe this movie. And this very large account on TikTok, who had engaged with him initially, pushed it out to all of his followers and said, "Go follow this guy and learn more about this movie." Now, when he started, he had minimal, maybe under 1,000 followers. He's got over 1 million followers.
Wow. Now that's a good way to promote a film.
Isn't it?
Well, let me tell you about it. Jean Reno, who's this legendary French actor and was quite the heartthrob back in the day, he plays a fisherman in Brazil who finds a penguin who's lost. He's lost from his migrating family of penguins from Antarctica up to further north. And so he takes him in. He becomes a pet. He has gifts. He can think. He can do things. He can learn. And so he would leave in the winter, in the summer, go back down to Antarctica, come back every year. 8 years he did that. And it's their story. And it's not an easy story because, people didn't approve, and researchers actually stole Dim Dim, the penguin. So it's a really cool movie. And I hope people, all these millions, go out to see it, because I'd love to see more like this.
I got to tell you, it is the top movie I want to see this week, largely because all around at every touch point, there is kindness in this story.
Yes.
The virality of it on TikTok.
Yeah.
The man who actually is behind it is a cancer researcher, and he's so sweet. Like, I encourage people, just go on TikTok and search my penguin friend and find this guy. He is just adorable. And then the movie itself is just a really feel-good story.
Well, you've only seen
so
the trailer. Yeah. You've only seen the
trailer.
True.
I'm sure there's some upsetting parts as well, but just all around, I just think it sounds very
okay. Because I don't think you're going to go see Caligula.
No. I am out. I will stick with my penguin friend this week. So, Anne, thanks very much for joining me today. You will be back next week with a lot more. So, we'll see you then.
See you then, Candace.
I'm so happy to introduce you to my next guest, Claire Zlobin, the founder of Life with a Baby, Canada's largest peer-to-peer network of women with children aged 0 to 12. Claire is also the creator of Drop of Golden Sun, a collection of stories and blogs from parents traveling the world with their little ones. She joins me today to share her insights on kids learning to scuba dive and some of the best family-friendly snorkeling and diving spots. Welcome to the show, Claire.
Thanks, Candace. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling us about the benefits of kids learning to scuba dive and at what age they can get started with their certification?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of benefits, I think it's that connection that they get with, the underwater world. For my kids, really it was us wanting to scuba dive with them. But one of the things that came out of that was my son is such an environmentalist. Both my kids are. They have a much more appreciation for taking care of that side of the world, which they wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started scuba diving, I remember very specifically that feeling of being under the water and thinking, this is the closest I'll ever get to a God, whatever God you may believe in. It is just so magical being under the water. So what a gift to give to your kids. Do you have any essential sort of tips and strategies for parents who are considering introducing their children to scuba diving?
Absolutely. So when my husband is an advanced diver and my daughter wanted to dive with him. At the time that we actually started scuba diving as a family, I had a deathly fear of deep water. But I figured if she's going down there, I'm going to go with her. So definitely prepare both yourself and the kids. The good thing is that in order to scuba dive, you have to take the PADI course. So, that was a really important piece of it for them to understand what's happening in down there, that safety piece, that understanding piece. And because kids can be certified as young as 10, as a junior open water diver, I feel that that educational piece is so important for both parents and kids.
When you went for your certification, did you do that here in Canada or did you do it at a resort?
So we actually did it with Kids Sea Camp. So like I said, because I had such a fear of deep water, I wanted to be extra cautious. And I had learned about Kids Sea Camp and Margot Payton, which is a program specifically around scuba diving with kids. She has 100% success rate and has certified thousands and thousands of kids. So I felt that was a really good option. And they actually do family diving vacations all over the world. So we chose Cayman Islands. And so we did the educational portion at home. And then we did the full certification a week away in Cayman Islands.
So it took a full week from the time you arrived to the end to receive your certification, or how long did that take?
It took about 4 days. And then, so for the first 4 days, it was kind of in water, or the first 3 days it was in water in the pool. And by the third afternoon, we were in the ocean. And then the fourth day, we actually did a family dive together.
I love this, by the way. I just think this is such a great thing to do with your family. So how do you ensure, though, that kids are comfortable and safe while diving? Because I think kids a lot of times will, try to put on a brave face with their parents and have some fears. So how did you help sort of calm that for your kids?
I think part of it is, again, because it's a process, it took about 2-3 months from the time that we decided that we were going to do it. The educational piece online, talking about it. My daughter, luckily, takes after my husband, so she didn't have that fear. But my son actually did. He was only, I think she was 11, so he was 8 or 7.5 at the time, and he could do the in-pool portion, and he could use the regulator, but he couldn't go under, obviously, because of his age. He was a little bit more nervous, so we had that kind of conversation with him. I think a lot of it is calming your own fears, because if you're nervous, then that's going to go off on the kids. And in all honesty, if you're not excited about it and it's not something that's fun for you, I wouldn't say that this is something you have to do. But if it's something that excites you and you love snorkeling and diving and want to include your kids, then just having those conversations, again, that educational piece, knowing that they understand the content makes you feel comfortable that when they do go into the water, they'll know what to do.
So your kids have now been certified for quite a few years. So, and you've traveled extensively. Do you book vacations around where you can go diving? And do you have any favorite spots for diving with kids?
Yes, so we do book some of our vacations specifically around diving. I actually recently went to Belize specifically because they're the world's largest living reef. And so that was an amazing experience. They have a lot of marine parks that you can dive. And honestly, it feels like you're in an aquarium. There's just so much life and just such beautiful colors. So I'd say my number one spot right now is definitely Belize. We love Roatan as well. Again, same thing. The kids were excited. They saw lots of Nemos and Dories swimming around. And Cayman Islands again, because it was one of the first places that we dived together, but also just the underwater life and also the quality of the corals and the quality of just the underwater world.
And have you dove anywhere in Canada?
So we did dive at in Bruce Peninsula.
Near Tobermory, right?
Yes,
I keep hearing about that but yeah, the difference in temperature, I'm sure, is significant.
Yes, but beautiful. And, actually surprisingly, I found that towards the middle of October was one of the warmer times. Maybe like the water warms up over the summer, but we went in October, beautiful colors of the trees, and then, your wetsuit and you're good to go.
So any advice then for families planning their first scuba diving trip together? I mean, just alone, I'm just thinking about gear. Do you rent it or do you bring your own?
At the beginning, I'd say rent it, especially if you don't know yet if this is something you're going to invest in as a family. Maybe it's something that you want to try. So there are resort courses that you can try, on your next vacation. The resorts all have the scuba diving in the pool, try it out, and then they may take you out for a dive. I would say that with kids specifically, there are a lot of forms. So my kids had, when they were little, a history of reactive airway and similar to asthma. So understanding that, ensuring that you speak with your child's doctor, their pediatrician, that, when they do go underwater, this is something that will be safe for them. So I would say that for myself, I would try the resort course, but I wouldn't necessarily do it with kids. I would say make sure that you actually do speak with your doctor. And I would go with a company like Kids Sea Camp Family Divers, because again, they have that experience in specifically certifying children. Check out the PADI website as well for all the resources. And one of the things that you do need if you are going diving is insurance. So you do need diving insurance. We use Dan, but you can check out the different options that are available to you.
And is there, does your certification expire? Do you have to keep up your skills or retest if you haven't been diving in maybe a year or more? I'm not sure what the timeline would be. I can't remember myself. I know I'm totally have to go get recertified.
Yes, you do have to dive at least once per year. If you haven't, then you do need to requalify. It's not a full certification, but just to ensure that you still understand the skills and especially when you're down there, communicating with the other people that you're with. Generally, you dive with a buddy as well. So just, I think I actually do like that option that you have to have done it and then requalify if you need.
I imagine that you've written about this extensively on your website. So where can people find out more and connect with you if maybe they have some questions?
Absolutely. So I'd say check out Drop of Golden Sun. That's the website. And on Instagram, Drop of Golden Sun CA.
All right. Fantastic. Claire, thank you so much for joining me today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Candace. This was so fun.
If today's podcast resonated with you, spread the word and share the inspiration. Don't forget to hit subscribe on What She Said across your favorite podcast platforms. Crave more? Join my vibrant community by signing up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com, and let's get social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at What She Said Talk. Dive into my world a little deeper on TikTok and Threads at Candace Said. And for those who love the airwaves, catch me weekly on 105.9 The Region, Blast the Radio, and 107.7 Pulse FM. Until next time, keep making waves and remember your...
Hey there, this is Todd Arkell, host of The Mental Approach. Thank you for taking the time to listen to The Mental Approach. I created this series for parents and their athletes because everyone is training their physical skills, but so few of you are training your mind. And I've assembled a cross-section of athletes and coaches as guests to provide you with inspirational stories, practical advice, and some encouragement to gain the edge you need both on and off the field of play. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course at thementalapproach.com.
I'm Andrea Askowitz.
And I'm Allison Langer. And we are the hosts of Writing Class Radio, a podcast, but we are so much more. We have writing classes. So if you are looking for live online classes where you can join a community, write to a prompt, get feedback, and get better, check out all our classes at writingclassradio.com.
And listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at writingclassradio.com.
Voice matters.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.